Hello again. We are Chris Lee and Chase Robinson of Southeastern 16, continuing our preview series of SEC football teams for 2016. Today, we get to the Kentucky Wildcats, Chase, a team which has a roster I think that gets a little more interesting as you dive in. I think Kentucky, a team not a lot of people were talking about. This has been a team that I think people have had as a sleeper in some of the last couple of years. Not maybe hearing as much talk about the Cats in that regard this year, but maybe we should be.
Yeah, I feel like with several teams, you go in with the perception of what everybody's talking about, but once you go in, once you look at the roster, once you see the guys coming back, the guys that kind of changes your perspective on the team, and I think that's the case for Kentucky. Once we've kind of gotten in the weeds of the roster and the guys that have coming back, so yeah, it should be an interesting year for the Kentucky Wildcats. Before we dive into it, though, let's remind you about Bet Online, the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything online sports betting. Right now, you can receive a 50% free bet of up to $250 on your first deposit to bet on anything from the Olympics. Those are starting very soon, to baseball, to Formula One racing. Bet Online has every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads while the games are being played. When the game's over, you can go on to the online casino and get in on a game of blackjack or poker, or unwind with one of the over 150 slots games. Head over to the website today to get in on the action. Use promo code BELIEVE, BLEAV, for your 50% free bet credit on your first deposit up to $250. Bet Online, the game starts here.
Chase, it's been a weird last few years for Kentucky offensively. Seeing changes in offensive coordinators, get another one this year, changes in quarterbacks. Last year, the Cats tried a transfer quarterback. Devin Leary never really worked out like people thought they would. This year, the Cats go in the portal for really 3 transfers. If you consider Bo Allen a transfer, he's been at Kentucky. But Kentucky got Brock Vandagriff. It has also landed the starting quarterback at Rutgers from a year ago as its backup. That, of course, is Gavin Wimsatt. And I think that's where the rebuild of this offense will start.
Yeah, you mentioned Devin Leary. It did not go like Kentucky thought it would. It didn't go like a lot of people thought it would at quarterback for the Wildcats. So yeah, they've gone out. They've got Brock Vandagriff. He 5-star guy coming out of high school. He's been in a winning program at Georgia. We haven't seen a ton of him. He's not very proven, but he steps into this offense, and I think that they were pleased with what they saw in the spring, and I think it kind of all starts with him, and he was in that really good quarterback class with Caleb Williams, Drake May, J.J. McCarthy. We're all in that same class as Vandagriff, and so he was right up there with them as far as numbers in high school, and so we know he's a good quarterback, but he really hasn't gotten his chance to prove that yet, and so I think he can really help this offense. And I know we're going to dive into the other positions, but I think when it starts at the quarterback, I think Vandagriff has a chance to shine in this offense at Kentucky. And again, you mentioned a new coordinator, as it seems to happen a lot there at Kentucky, but I think he will fit in very nicely in this offense. And then you mentioned there's guys to go to after him. Gavin Wimsatt, as you mentioned, from Rutgers. He had good numbers last year. I think 1,700 yards there at Rutgers, and can run the ball a little bit as well. So I was impressed with him looking at his numbers. And then you mentioned Bo Allen as well, redshirt transfer there. So the quarterback room is good. Whether or not Vandagriff pans out, I think Wimsatt behind him it works out really well for the quarterback room. But I think Vandagriff has a bright future there at Kentucky.
Chase, I really like his receiving room. I've always
Yep.
liked Dane Key and Barion Brown, and now they go and add Ja'Mori Maclin from North Texas, who had 1,004 yards and 11 scores last year. They get Fred Ferrier Jr. as a backup from UAB. I feel like they really got a lot of talent to throw to.
Yeah, they do. I like those as well. I really like Maclin. I'm glad you brought him up. Transfer there from North Texas. You mentioned 1,000 yards. Has played a lot of good, meaningful football. And that's the thing when you look up and down the wide receiving room. There's a lot of experience. There's a lot of of veteran guys. Barion Brown has played 13 games. Dane Key has played that many. Fred Ferrier from UAB, as you mentioned, has played a lot of games. A couple of high school guys in there as well. Anthony Brown-Stevens has played in a lot of games. You get into the tight end room; those guys have played a lot of games, and Josh Caddis and Jordan Dingles. So there's a lot of guys that have experience, that have played meaningful snaps, that have played together. There's just two guys coming out of high school, but then only two transfers in the wide receiver room as well. So a lot of these guys have played together. They know each other. And again, you've got a quarterback room who is not familiar with these guys, but I think Vandagriff, with the really strong arm that he has and the receivers that he has here, I think that could be a really good combination for Kentucky this year, for to have these really good receivers as they do. So I think the receiving room is definitely a strength for this team, and I think some guys to watch definitely. Barion Brown, one of those guys, Dane Key, and then as you mentioned, Maclin as well, transferring in. I think those are three big targets for Vandagriff this season there for Kentucky, but all three really bright stars and a deep wide receiver room. And I think that's another really important part is the depth in this room could go a long way as well.
Yeah, I'm not sure about the running game. Training from Ohio State was kind of a pedestrian back there. They lose Ray Davis, but what's going to help is the offensive line. They've got Eli and Marquez Cox back. Dylan Ray returns as a starter. Jager Burton returns as a starter. And they added Gerald Mincey, who was a six-time right starter at right tackle for Tennessee last year. So a lot of guys here, and they've got a little depth behind that too. So I think running back is not as important a position as it used to be. And if you can block for that guy and you got thread the pass, which Kentucky's going to have, it may all work out just fine in the end.
Yeah, and what I just brought up with the fact that a lot of these guys have played together in the wide receiver room, you look at the roster in the offensive line positions, and it's pretty much the same. They have two guys who have transferred in, Gerald Mincey from Tennessee, and then Jalen Farmer from Florida. But the rest of these guys, they've played together. They've worked together. You got guys who are returning starters who maybe a year ago it didn't go like they planned for it to, but all these guys are back. I think that's really going to help this team and these guys on the offensive line. I think Gerald Mincey is a great addition to this offensive line. He started at Tennessee. He couple of sacks in there did a great job of protecting his guys from getting sacked last year. He's a big guy, 338 pounds at 6'6". And so I really like Mincey and his addition there. This is a very veteran offensive line. And I mean, that's what you need when you have an inexperienced quarterback like Brock Vandagriff. And so I think that's a really good combination there for Vandagriff to have this veteran line like he does.
Well, a trademark of Kentucky teams has always been a good defense under Mark Stoops, and I think they've got one this year. They added, but when they start with All-American Deone Walker in the trenches, some other experienced guys behind him, and then you got three linebackers in Weaver, Dumas Johnson, the transfer from Georgia, and Derek Jackson, who have all got a shot, or you're seeing get all SEC mention. Those are old guys. Those are guys that have made plays before. I think you got to love their start at the front seven here.
Yeah, I think that's a great observation. Yeah, and I was listening to Mark Stoops at SEC Media Days, and really all of his interviews, all of his appearances, he just talked about the experience and the depth that they have on this defense, and that's something that really stands out to me. That coaches will point this out, but the fact that he's really, really excited about that, I think, shows that he knows the capability of his defense. They got three guys who transferred in there as we look at their two deep, but so many guys coming back. And yeah, I think it all starts with Deone Walker and his experience there at tackle, his numbers just incredible on his sacks and tackles for loss. And then you go down the line there and see other guys who, have been there. They've played together. You mentioned Walker, probably a first round pick. I mean, he's kind of the anchor there. But always impressed with JJ Weaver as well. He's played a lot of meaningful football and is quick, able to get around some of these offensive linemen. So I really like the front for Kentucky. I think the defense as a whole is going to be kind of the anchor for the whole team of Kentucky. But this front for the Kentucky Wildcats possibly could be one of the strongest units on the field.
Well, and they've also got Max Hairston in the
Yep.
secondary, a first-team All-League corner. They get a couple returnees at both safety spots. Neither of those guys returning starters, but Zion Childress and Jordan Lovett played a lot of ball last year. DJ Waller, the transfer from Michigan, will presumably start aside Hairston at the other corner. He was in contention to win a job at Michigan. So, again, you look around this defense and not a lot of weaknesses anywhere that I can really spot.
Yeah, you're right. And I feel like people have been talking about this defense for a while. If they all stayed together, what they could be. And I think we're at that point, and there's so much depth. And I think that is such a strong suit for Kentucky right now, is all the depth on defense. There's going to be injuries. There's a lot of football games that are going to be played. There's going to be guys who are banged up and are going to have to miss a week or a few drives or whatever it is. But you've got guys behind them. You got quality guys, and that's something that I don't think Kentucky has had a lot of in the past is quality guys behind your starters, and they have definitely have that this year. Whether it's the guys who've transferred in or the guys who've just waited their turn, have been playing football, waiting to start it on the Kentucky defense. Well, they're getting that this year, and really impressed with the corners. I like Maxwell Hairston. He's played a lot of football, and has done a great job. And you mentioned DJ Waller; he's transferring in from Michigan, and he'll be on that that other corner. I think the corner position is in great hands with those two guys. And I think depth is huge this year, and so much talent when it comes to depth. You look at last year; they ranked 53rd in scoring, giving up 25.8 points per game. Rushing, they rank 14th in the country, only allowing 113.1 yards per game, ranked 17th total with 353 and a half per game. So, this defense was good last year. They didn't give up too much, but I feel like they're even stronger this year. And I think Kentucky could be a team to watch out for if their defense plays to the potential that we're talking about right now and plays like we see it on paper. I know the game is not played on paper, but just looking up and down their roster, I think Kentucky could be a team to watch for, Chris.
Yeah, I do too. And then everybody excuse my voice. We're playing hurt in order to try to get you our previews before the season starts. But, one other thing that stands out to me about them is they returned their entire defensive coaching staff from last year. By best of my math, you don't see that happen a lot. And special teams, they're not great in terms of punting, but they do return, I think, pretty much everybody. They've got a solid kicker in Alex Rayner, the transfer from Georgia Southern, who was good for them last year. And they've also got Barion Brown, who is a phenomenal return man. Averaged 36 yards a kickoff return last year. I think if I've got this right, returned 3 of 16 kickoffs for touchdown. That's amazing. So Cats could beat you in some ways that don't show up on the traditional stat sheets as you look at them.
Yeah, and punter has been a question mark. I know for Kentucky recently of trying to get a guy who can be maybe a portal addition is what they were looking for the offseason to give some more consistency. But special teams, especially with Alex Rayner coming back. He converted 10 of 11 field goal attempts last year. So he was on the money. And then you mentioned Barion Brown and his returning abilities, really, really impressive. So, I think special teams, they're in good shape as well. But I'm just really impressed with what I've seen, just looking up and down the roster, doing our homework to do this video, just in the way this Kentucky team looks and the way they're shaping up right now. And you look at their schedule and. We'll learn quickly about the Kentucky Wildcats having a conference game against South Carolina in week 2. I mean, that's early for an SEC game. You get Southern Miss, then South Carolina, then Georgia. So 2 of the first 3 games are SEC games. I mean, we'll learn right off the bat, Chris, really the makeup of this Kentucky team.
Yeah, not an easy schedule, but I like the Cats' chances to get back to a bowl, which is pretty much a regular occurrence under Mark Stoops.
Yeah, and Mark Stoops is I love what he's done to Kentucky. I mean, he's now the longest tenured SEC football coach now that Nick Saban has retired, and he's got an overall record of 73-65 in his time at Kentucky in the 11 years, and yes, he's had to do a lot of staff changes over the years, but Mark Stoops has really brought in a lot of consistency, I feel like. It may not be seen in the SEC record, but I feel like overall he's got this to a consistently winning program. And I think they have the chance to take some steps in the right direction again this year to keep that going, especially with all the guys that are coming back. And Mark Stoops his name was tossed around in the Texas A&M job, and I think it's because of his consistency that he's brought to Kentucky. And I really like what he's done with this roster. And again, you don't see a lot of transfers on the roster this year, but they're quality guys who are going to make an immediate impact. He didn't go for let's bring a lot of guys in. He went for quality over quantity, and he did get some really quality guys to come into this program there at Kentucky. But it'll be interesting to see how it plays out for Kentucky this year. But again, I think they have the pieces, especially defensively, with all the depth, with all the guys returning, and then offensively. You bring in a new coordinator. You got Brock Vandagriff. You got a strong offensive line. Eric Wolford, I should mention, coming back to Kentucky. He's been the offensive line coach at Alabama the last couple of years under Nick Saban. He's returned to Kentucky where he was for several years. And so, and then the receiver room, like we mentioned earlier, very strong as well. So I think the makeup of this Kentucky team is really where they want to be heading into this 2024 season.
Yeah, playoffs might be a lot to bite off with Georgia and Ole Miss and Texas on the schedule, but I could easily see a path to 8 or 9 wins. And hey, don't bet against Mark Stoops to win at least 6 or 7. He does it every year. We've seen more from him, and this could be a year where he does it again. All right, looking forward to seeing the Cats this year. Chase, I think you got one more thing on the way out. I'm sorry.
No, I completely agree. Just this is the team just looking at it that I think can win 8 or 9 games, and I think you should count Kentucky in that. I mean, yeah, playoffs is a stretch with the schedule that they have, but this is a team that, hey, it wouldn't surprise me if they won some games they shouldn't this year, just because, especially the makeup of the defense. Like, they're going to keep a lot of teams from scoring. They're going to limit production for a lot of teams. Even these good offenses, we talk a lot about SEC offenses. Even with these offenses, I think Kentucky has a good chance to stop some of these guys. So I'm really impressed with what I've seen from the Wildcats.
Yeah, can't wait to see how it plays out. All right, thank you for watching. We cover the SEC football, baseball, basketball year round. Apologies for my voice; it's usually better than this. But if you made it this far, thanks for watching and putting up with me. That is, he's Chase Robinson. I'm Chris Lee. We are Southeastern 14, presented by Bet Online.